Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Donald Trump today welcomed the positive response, as he called it, of Hamas towards the ceasefire, with Benjamin Netanyahu declaring that some of the amendments that Hamas proposed yesterday on the ceasefire, despite them having a positive response, were unacceptable. Despite that, Benjamin Netanyahu is sending a delegation, and the talks are that we are moving ahead towards a deal. Next week, there's a likelihood that Donald Trump will be declaring something quite early. Reports are that Donald Trump is going to have an intimate meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, not an official one. Nothing has been confirmed if they're going to make a joint statement in relation to the ceasefire. Of course, they need to have everything concluded and resolved. Benjamin Netanyahu's allies are now threatening still in the government, and Netanyahu in the past couple of days made more moves and took more steps that indicate that he is indeed going towards a ceasefire, especially with his meeting to one of the most, if not the most, fierce critics against him, the mother of one of the Israeli prisoners of war, who made very severe statements against Benjamin Netanyahu and was calling him a killer. He eventually met her and they were hugging each other in an Israeli area called the Nir Oz, next to the Gaza Strip. That has a very symbolic meaning too, and important indications about what's to come. But despite all of the developments that are happening in relation to the ceasefire itself and the moves towards a ceasefire, from the Palestinian resistance perspective, nothing has stopped, and they are still increasing their attacks against the Israeli genocide forces. Yesterday, I spoke to you about the report that came from Israel. One Israeli official from the IDF was speaking with the broadcasting authority, and he said the following. He said that the Hamas fighters in the northern and southern sectors know the army forces gathering points and attack them with unprecedented determination in recent months. The broadcasting authority also added, based on this official, the IDF senior official, that Hamas fighters have resumed launching bold and daring attacks on army forces with machine guns, explosive devices, and rocket projectiles. So Israel is now admitting and confirming that the fierceness of the Palestinian resistance is escalating. And today we had a new video coming from the Palestinian resistance about one of their recent ambushes that I wanted to share with you here, during which, in a campaign that they're calling the David Stones, they targeted the Israeli terror forces in the central part of Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis is proving to be the biggest graveyard nowadays of the Israeli terror forces. In this ambush that came from Al-Qassam brigades, it happened in an area called Al-Mahatta, where the fighters of the resistance movement, they prepared two ambushes for two Merkava tanks and targeted them with two Palestinian-made Shawad explosive devices. And they also targeted another troop carrier with a Yasin 105 RPG, also Palestinian-made. They're saying that the Israelis, and they also targeted the rescue forces. They're saying that the Israelis also confirmed that several were killed and wounded. However, what is significant about this is that this actual ambush that came from the Palestinian resistance is in line with the recent ambushes that are happening against Israel. And like what the IDF is confirming, the Palestinian resistance fighters are monitoring the terror forces of Israel inside of the Gaza Strip, preparing very heavy ambushes against them, and are implementing the ambushes in a direct confrontation way. Like this ambush over here, you will see in a moment, the Palestinian fighter, he will hold a device and go to the actual tank and target them directly. And in this video, they of course say what the Israeli forces are doing in Gaza, how they're killing innocent women and children and destroying homes. and praying that their attacks will be successful against the genocide force. And here we can see the ambush beginning with 2 Merkava tanks in the region that the Palestinian resistance fighters will be targeting. Again, everything is on camera, live. Well, live at the time, and now they're publishing it. This ambush took place yesterday. It was recorded on the 4th of July. So imagine that the Palestinian resistance is publishing immediately after they conduct this operation. And that's in an area, the area of Khan Yunis, an area where so many Israeli forces are there at the moment, and they're having so many forces there, total destruction they're causing. But the Palestinian resistance fighters come up from under the rubble, and you can see the resistance fighter here going towards the Israeli tank to plant the device next to it. Again, total freedom of movement and very hard blows against the Israeli genocide forces. Here is running back, and bang, the tank is on fire. This man is taking this device to a tank. I mean, people need to comprehend that. Sometimes, you know, words are difficult to describe, and these devices of Al-Qassam brigades are very, very effective in terms of the damage that they conduct. They build them in a certain way that they conduct a lot of damage with the explosion, with the after effects of the explosion. And clearly, from the Palestinian resistance perspective, they are increasing the attacks with the same momentum that they had previously. And despite the fact that Israel is confirming, by the way, that they had these attacks against them and that some of them were killed, some of their forces were eliminated, and several were wounded too, they're of course not talking about the real numbers. At the end of the day, you know, the other day the Palestinian resistance targeted 2 APCs of Israel. Each one of them has at least 7 people, and they were burning, and Israel didn't even rescue them. They just dragged them after they were burning. So at least 14 to 20 people were killed, but Israel confirmed only 7 were killed at the time. So you're talking about a case where Israel isn't really publishing the accurate numbers. Yet despite that, the Palestinian resistance is targeting. Here, the Palestinian resistance fighters are targeting the tank that came to the rescue of the other tanks. So they're still in the same place, targeting other forces that they come, putting themselves out there, putting themselves at risk, and not being fazed by anything. In this following video, they also that happened on the 3rd and 4th of July. They targeted also 3 Israeli APCs, or armed personnel carriers, again going up from under the rubble, moving towards the genocide forces, targeting them, recording everything, and publishing it just 1 day later. So Israel is saying, by the way, that they've eliminated most of them, and you know, they're going into a ceasefire soon, or there's a likelihood that they're going to go into a ceasefire with all of this talk. But the Palestinian resistance, from their perspective, nothing is stopping. And even when there is, or if there is a ceasefire, the Palestinian resistance is going to remain there, preparing for the next round and preparing for the next ambushes that they're going to conduct against the Israeli genocide forces. These were other scenes from the other aircraft carriers, and here we can see another part of the ambush here that was carried out by the Al-Qassam brigades. Again, you know, going from under the rubble, the area has been completely destroyed by Israel. And in the majority of the areas, you know, there are no civilians in most of these areas where the fightings happen. But from the Palestinian resistance perspective, they are there wherever they see the Israeli terror forces, preparing ambushes for them, preparing to target them, and constantly having these fierce battles against them. And again, these weren't the only scenes that happened, you know. with a Palestinian fighter going towards a tank. I mean, the other day I think I shared that video, but if I haven't, this was the video that was published last week or several days back from the Palestinian resistance as well, targeting the Israeli APCs. In Israel confirmed at the time that it was a disaster. You can see the Palestinians were monitoring these forces again, but this was where the part where the Palestinian resistance fighter goes towards the tank, towards the armed personnel carrier, climbs over it, puts the device and explodes it. And there's two of them that are exploded, by the way. One that he conducted and another one that was directly attacked by another Palestinian fighter in Gaza. At the time, Israel confirmed that 7 were killed. There's at least 7 in each APC. By the way, some of them can hold up to 14 people. So Israel could be playing with the numbers, but they've been manipulating these numbers for a very long time. And you can see the explosions that happened here. That's the first explosion of the other APC, and then there's the volume of the second explosion. This has been a pattern from the Palestinian resistance. This is not the first time, of course, but what we are actually seeing lately is the fact that it's only increasing. It's only increasing. How? Not how. That's a different story. But Israel is now confirming that they're escalating and continuing with their attacks in very intense levels. These were some of the videos that were released previously by the Palestinian resistance too, in relation to attacks. Look at that. I mean, Palestinian fighters waiting for a tank, going directly attacking it, running away. These were some of the scenes. This was another one of a Palestinian fighter, again, a man confronting a tank. This is the type of resistance that you have in Gaza, and that's why the Palestinian resistance is unbeatable. It cannot be defeated. When sometimes we don't have the relevant weapons, they will target the Israeli tanks with whatever they have. I mean, like I said, sometimes they climb on them, sometimes they attack them directly. But the moral of the story is in relation to the Palestinian resistance is that they are intensifying. I mean, yesterday I was speaking about the ambush of 4 Palestinian resistance movements combined. The biggest one was for the armed doing of the PIJ, where they took down at least 40 Israeli IDF terrorists in Gaza. Again, showing you that it's increasing despite the talks of the ceasefire. This is important and very crucial, because some will say that, the Palestinians might be going into a ceasefire because they can't fight anymore, or they have been indeed eliminated, like Israel says. No, that's the reason that Israel is going towards a ceasefire, not the other way around. Israel has been trying to eliminate them for 2 years now without success, and it's the continuation of the confrontation of the Palestinian resistance, the escalation, and in Israeli terms, like the senior IDF official said, the boldness in their attacks and how they're intensifying them and approaching the Israeli tanks. It's these things that are pushing the Israelis more towards a ceasefire, because the Palestinian resistance are still there, still strong, getting stronger, and intensifying the attacks against the genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, Hamas posted a positive response. They published a statement in which they spoke about a positive response that they handed to the mediators in relation to the ceasefire proposal, with slight amendments. Then there was a response that came from Donald Trump, who welcomed the response of Hamas during a short statement that he made while he was traveling. He welcomed the positive response in relation to the ceasefire. He said it was good that they responded with a positive spirit, and he was hoping that there could be a deal by next week, the week where Benjamin Netanyahu will be visiting Donald Trump in the White House. In the meantime, Benjamin Netanyahu made statements. The statements of Benjamin Netanyahu were, we are actually not accepting the amendments of Hamas. But despite the fact that he's saying Israel doesn't accept the amendments of Hamas, he's still sending a delegation to Qatar. What are these things that Benjamin Netanyahu isn't agreeing upon? They're not very clear, but the reports in Israel are talking about the fact that they might be related to the way that the aid is being distributed inside of Gaza. That's something that Israel wanted to dictate with the Americans through the GHF. However, even in Israel, they said that the UNRWA and the Red Crescent will have a role in allowing all of the aid into the Gaza Strip. So, of course, there were multiple reports coming in Israel about Netanyahu's statement, but again, none of them were saying anything about the fact that there is no possibility to reach any sort of deal despite these amendments that were made by Benjamin Netanyahu. And Benjamin Netanyahu, these were some of the indications. Of course, we've been speaking about the indications why it could, because we all know the reasons why everything could go wrong. That's known to everyone. But we're trying to see what are the statements or the signs that it could go towards a ceasefire. Of course, you have all of the continuation of resistance inside of the Gaza Strip, the crisis that's happening and has happened from day one in the IDF, but is only intensifying, the social problems internally, the economic disaster, the delegitimization of Israel as a country, the threats of more sanctions coming against the state, and the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu's position in relation to his coalition is slowly fading away, because we're headed towards 2026 in 6 months. This is going to be the year where Israel is supposed to see an election in October. Benjamin Netanyahu, there were indications that he wasn't really interested in having any elections in October, just because they're going to land, next to the 7th of October, and, he might have more scrutiny. Now he feels like he's more on a high after an attack in Iran. There are more likelihoods. But one of the very serious things that happened was the fact that he met with a woman called Einav Tsengauker. I spoke about this woman several times. She is probably the fiercest critic of Benjamin Netanyahu from the families of the POWs in Israel. She previously told Benjamin Netanyahu, "I will be your worst nightmare." She told Benjamin Netanyahu that he is a killer and that he is killing the prisoners of war inside of Gaza. But now Benjamin Netanyahu actually went and met the woman. He went and met her, and guess what? Again, even the Times of Israel saying he's meeting his fierce critic. He met her in Nir Oz, one of the places that were affected by on the 7th of October, and she was also seen hugging him and hugging his wife as well, in an indication that, well, he might have told her certain things about getting towards a deal. This woman has been saying things against Benjamin Netanyahu that Netanyahu's biggest enemies haven't been saying about him. He's a mass murderer. He's killing the Israeli prisoners of war. He's a criminal. He needs to be sacked. He went and saw her and he spoke to her. Again, clearly there is something that happened there between her and Benjamin Netanyahu. After that, she went out and made a statement. She said that, "I hope that we will come with good news soon, but I also hope that the Israeli Prime Minister will agree to an all-out deal, not just a deal in Nox." So far, there is a prospect of a deal happening in Nox. From the POW families' perspective, it's better than nothing, but that would risk, of course, the remaining ones, because the Palestinian resistance, so long as there is no direct solution that would include everything, total withdrawal, release of the Palestinian prisoners, allowing all of the aid in, the rebuilding process, the day after all of that, they won't be releasing all of the prisoners of war. Not that only, they won't be releasing the heaviest prisoners of war, because those who are remaining in the hands of the Palestinian resistance are the officers and the commanders of the IDF. These are not like people who they took from other parts surrounding Gaza. No, these were active in the army. They weren't even like reservists. They were actively deployed around Gaza in the Gaza division, and they are the ones who are held now. And that has a very crucial importance inside of the Israeli army. Why? Because if Benjamin Netanyahu, well, he's already being criticized for killing so many prisoners of war anyway, because of the whole genocide and how he conducted it inside of Gaza with indiscriminate bombing that killed at least 40, as confirmed by Israel, but the number could be higher again. If he will not be releasing the officers and the commanders of the IDF, well, what is that message going to send to anyone who still has any sort of belief or hope or faith in this genocidal army? It's going to be very difficult. So he's going to have to get them out. Based on the information that we're getting at the moment, it doesn't look like he wants to have a full deal. But again, we could see a surprise. He could be deliberately doing that, preparing to keep it as a surprise once he meets with Donald Trump. And then he can declare that, well, guess what? We're reaching an all-out deal. Because he met with the cabinet. He's already receiving a lot of criticism from Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who are, again, threatening him. But now, and despite him having certain points against, the amendment requests of Hamas in relation to the ceasefire, the positive signs are more than the negative signs. Of course, things can go both ways anyway, but there are still talks. The delegation went to Doha. Clearly, Donald Trump wanted to declare something with him. All of that is still going, so there are more positive signs than negative signs that the ceasefire might go ahead. But in the meantime, the Palestinian resistance is landing some of its hardest blows on Israel with continued attacks, direct confrontations, making life hell for them all across of Gaza, and especially in Khan Yunis, where the recent ambush happened and that the Palestinian resistance published. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. Thank you so much again for everyone for tuning in for another show. Thank you for everyone who participated in the chat, everyone who sent supers as well. Thank you so much for your support, Michael, Sheetster, Tor, Mark, Rajesh. Thank you very much for that. In the meantime, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, night, or evening, and I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.